There is a room inside a hospital in Montreal that does not appear on any official map of the building. It has no plaque, no exhibit, no acknowledgement that anything unusual ever happened inside it. But between 1957 and 1964, that room was the operational center of one of the most disturbing government programs ever conducted on civilians in the Western world. The CIA called it Subproject 68. The patients who went in thinking they were receiving psychiatric treatment came out unable to remember their own names. This is the story of the Allen Memorial Institute, Dr. Ewen Cameron, and the program the United States government spent decades making sure you would never fully understand. Project MKUltra was not a rumor. It was not a conspiracy theory. It was a classified CIA program that ran officially from 1953 to 1964 and was funded through a network of front organizations designed to hide the agency's involvement. At its peak, MKUltra had 149 active subprojects running simultaneously across 80 institutions, including universities, prisons, mental hospitals, and private research labs. The subjects were not enemy combatants. They were American and Canadian civilians, mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, students. In some documented cases, ordinary people who simply walked into a clinic looking for help. The driving logic behind MKUltra was fear. American intelligence officials had watched US soldiers returning from Korean prisoner of war camps behaving in ways that seemed impossible to explain. Some had made public statements that appeared to have been scripted. Some had confessed to things that investigators believed were false. The conclusion inside the CIA was that the Soviet Union and China had cracked something the United States had not, that they had found a way to override the human mind, to rewrite a person's beliefs, loyalties, and memories from the outside. MKUltra was the American attempt to catch up. Sidney Gottlieb ran the program's day-to-day operations. He was a chemist. He had a PhD from Caltech and a stutter and a clubfoot and an interest in folk dancing that his colleagues found strange. He was also the man who signed off on administering LSD to an unwitting mental patient in Kentucky for 174 consecutive days. He was the man who arranged for the CIA to purchase the world's entire supply of LSD for $240,000 in the early 1950s, a sum equivalent to roughly $4 million today. And he was the man who, in January 1972, drove personally to the CIA records facility and oversaw the physical destruction of the MKUltra files, not because the program had failed, because the political climate was shifting and those records were dangerous. Now, the Allen Memorial Institute. The building sits on the slope of Mount Royal in Montreal, inside a stone mansion that was donated to McGill University in the 1940s. Its location mattered. Montreal gave the CIA geographic distance from Washington. The Canadian context gave the program a layer of deniability. And Dr. Donald Ewen Cameron, the man running the institute, gave it scientific cover. Cameron was not a fringe figure. He was the first president of the World Psychiatric Association. He had testified at the Nuremberg trials. He was, by every external measure, one of the most respected psychiatrists in the world. What he was doing inside that building was something else entirely. Cameron believed that mental illness could be cured by erasing a patient's existing psychological patterns and replacing them with new ones. He called this process depatterning. The method involved prolonged drug-induced sleep, sometimes lasting weeks or months. It involved electroconvulsive shock therapy administered at voltages and frequencies far beyond any accepted therapeutic standard of the time. It involved sensory deprivation, placing patients in darkened rooms with padded helmets over their heads, cutting off all external input. And it involved something he called psychic driving, playing recorded messages on a loop directly into patients' ears for hours, sometimes for days. Messages that repeated statements about their identity, their behavior, their relationships, while they were sedated and unable to respond. Patients came to Cameron with depression, anxiety, minor behavioral problems. They left unable to recognize family members, unable to remember their childhoods, unable to perform basic tasks they had mastered years before. Some regressed to childlike states. Several required ongoing institutional care for the rest of their lives. None of them had consented to what was done to them. Most had no idea the CIA was involved. The funding came through a front organization called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, and the money trail was specifically designed to be untraceable. Cameron died in 1967. He never faced charges. He never testified before a government committee. He never publicly acknowledged what had been done at the Allen Memorial Institute under his direction. The CIA destroyed its MK Ultra records in 1973. The order came from director Richard Helms days before he left the agency following the Watergate scandal. Gottlieb carried out the destruction. 7 boxes of documents were shredded. The assumption was that this ended it, that no one would ever be able to reconstruct what had happened across 80 institutions over more than a decade. They were wrong. In 1977, during a routine search of the CIA's Retired Records Center, a staffer discovered roughly 20,000 pages of financial documents related to MK Ultra. They had been misfiled in a separate building and survived the shredder by accident. Those documents triggered a new round of Senate hearings. They were enough to confirm the scale of what had happened. They were not enough to tell the full story because the full story had already been destroyed. What the surviving records show is a program that operated in plain sight. It used universities, it used hospitals, it used the infrastructure of legitimate science as a cover for experiments that had no ethical framework and no accountability. The researchers involved ranged from willing participants who understood they were working for the CIA to academics who received funding through front organizations and had no idea their work was being used for this purpose. The subjects had no say in either case. 9 of the patients treated by Cameron eventually sued the Canadian government and the CIA. Some received settlements. Most of the legal battles were fought in ways specifically designed to minimize disclosure. The government's position, in case after case, was that revealing the details of how subjects were identified, recruited, or treated would compromise national security. The standard legal tools of accountability were turned into instruments of continued concealment. No researcher was ever federally prosecuted. Gottlieb died in 1999. When asked near the end of his life whether he felt any responsibility for what had happened, he said he viewed his entire career with the CIA, including MK Ultra, as essentially useless. That was his answer. Not remorse, not accountability, useless. The room in Montreal still exists. The Allen Memorial Institute still operates as a psychiatric facility. There's no official acknowledgement inside the building that anything happened there. The patients who are harmed, the ones who are still alive, are in their 80s and 90s now. The CIA's own documents confirm what was done. The location is documented. The funding is documented. The names are documented. What remains sealed is the question that nobody with institutional authority has ever been forced to answer on the record. How many of the 149 sub-projects are still not fully accounted for? How many institutions ran experiments that the destroyed records would have documented? How many people walked into a hospital for help and walked out as someone different and never knew why? The building sits on Mount Royal. The door is open, but the room where it happened has no sign.